Thank you so much, Olivia. That was wonderful. Tons of information that I'm sure are going to bring up a lot of questions, hopefully, for our discussion. So just before we move into that question and answers section of the session, I just wanted to leave here on the screen, and I will be copying the links themselves onto the chat box very shortly. I just wanted to leave like a series of resources. So Olivia gave us a great overview of the type of programs that you're going to find in the graduate realm, specifically within different fields of the arts. And one of the questions that we receive often, I would say, is okay, I think that I know what type of program I'm looking for, but one of the main problems that I find is that, of course, you do a Google search and the results are absolutely overwhelming. So what types of search engines or resources I can use? So basically what I left you here on the screen are a series of different national institutions in the US that offer this type of resources for doing searches within specific fields. You have the Association of Independent Colleges of Art and Design. You also have different national associations for music, for schools of music, dance, theater. The College Art Association has a great directory that even if you can't filter, it gives you a whole document that you can search alphabetically depending on the type of programs that you're interested in. So starting a little bit with a lot of the information that Olivia has given us, like she was saying, also going always to the source directly, that is to the website of the program itself, that is also a key point, and using these type of resources, you would have the basic resources or tools to start that search. So I'm going to copy those on the chat box I was saying, and I would like to open the floor now for any questions that you may have, either regarding the different programs that Olivia has talked to us about, other programs that you might be interested in, how to do a search, how to find funding, basically any questions that you may have during this process. I'm just gonna give a minute to start with that. Remember that if it's possible, it would be very helpful if you could submit them through the Q&A feature. It's a little bit easier to track them in this section versus on the chat box. And in the meantime, I'm going to start asking Olivia for something that we very often receive questions about, that is, how do I establish that first contact? You were saying that contact admission officers can be extremely helpful, but maybe because of the cultural difference, sometimes students from other countries don't know how to take this step. What information do I give? How do I introduce myself? What would be your advice on that?
That's a good question. And yes, it's very common when you go on a university website, it's not necessarily going to be super clear that you should contact a specific individual. So what I would recommend is there's always going to be a general email. A lot of times it looks like admission@universityname.edu. Email that email address, explain where you're coming from so they know you're international. Make sure that you give them your email as well as a phone number so someone can maybe just pick up the phone and call you if that's okay. And give a few details so they know a little bit more. What are you looking for? So they can direct that to the correct person and then get you started on a more personal level.
That's great. I think that's really like very useful, because like you were saying, sometimes navigating the website and finding the right person to contact. How about contacting professors? Should they be doing that at an early stage, or maybe going first through the admission office? What would be the timeline in that sense?
What I would recommend, if you happen to see on a website, here's a professor and you see their email, go go for it. That's fine.
Mhm.
It's pretty rare. Normally, that type of information is kind of withheld just because the professors don't necessarily want to be bombarded with prospective students, but that's okay. They're still very happy to speak with you. Normally, the path that takes is go through admission because as well, we want to make sure that you understand a little bit about our program. We understand what you're looking for before we go into those next steps of getting into the nitty gritty of what is that program going to look like. Let's hear from the professor himself. And that's generally how you can pursue speaking with a professor. And I would also say that's the same path if you want to speak with a student who goes to the school, go through admission and they can connect you up.
That's great. That's another point to keep in mind, that sometimes we want to get the perspective of a peer that has been going through the admission process, having a closer experience of the school, of the program itself. So that's always a resource that you can use as well. What we normally advise in the process is to do, first of all, a very thorough like exploration of the website. Try to find all of the information that you think is relevant. um, Basically, because also you don't want to be maybe asking questions that are very obvious on the website. So that might be useful first, but any other questions that you may have, like Olivia was saying, is this a matter of asking? Because there are going to be many details, especially coming from a completely different educational system, that you might not be aware of or understand. So that's always a very good starting point. I think we have Oh, I was seeing the chat. No, sorry. We don't have any questions yet, so I really would like to encourage you to ask any questions that you may have. As I was saying, there are no silly questions. Every one of us, when we are starting to navigate a new system and to explore options, is incredibly normal to have questions about it. So please take this opportunity. We have here Olivia, you have an admission officer in person um, for you to ask. So we have a question that is asking us, is this in essence a trade school?
Good question. No, it's not a trade school. It is a full-blown university. We are nationally and internationally accredited, and you will graduate with an actual degree diploma. In that sense, it's traditional. What is not traditional is we're very specialized in the creative industry. So at the undergraduate level, you're going to have some liberal art classes, and then you transition into a creative field. At the graduate level, those programs are going to be all within the creative industry. Now we have a wide range. Some students, when they hear creative industry, the arts, they're thinking, okay, acting, painting, and that's about it. No, there's so much more out there, but that's what we're going to be specialized in.
Great, thank you so much. Another question that is coming through is regarding funding. What type of funding is available in this sense?
That's a great question as well, and something that I would recommend asking every university, because there's going to be some information on the website, but often hearing it from the person themselves, particularly from that international perspective, is just very useful. At SCAD, about 80% of our incoming students are receiving some form of scholarship. We're going to be looking at your academics. So for the graduate level, we're looking at your undergrad grades, those transcripts. And then we're going to be looking at your portfolio and combining those two evaluations together for a scholarship. Those scholarships really are wide ranging. It can be $1,000 all the way up to full tuition. So it really is a wide range. The majority of students are going to be right in the middle. So that's something that absolutely, when you're looking at universities as a whole, I would recommend, if you fell in love with a university, but you're thinking maybe that's out of my price range, go through the process. I know that it is a lot of work, so you do have to, tick down your favorites, but you also never know what you can actually receive. Scholarships are often a process where a university first gives you a certain amount for the traditional route of looking at those grades or portfolio, and then we pursue other options and see, is there a needs-based scholarship? Can you apply to a specific international scholarship? And you have to go through this process before you hit that final price of what you would be paying. So keep that in mind.
I think that's an excellent point. And just adding to what Olivia said, keep in mind that many of these funding opportunities can be combined. That is, for those joining us from Spain, many of you are probably aware of the Beca Fulbright de Ampliación de Estudios Artísticos. That is one of the grants that the Fulbright Commission publishes every year in collaboration with the Ministry of Culture. So you're going to have that as an option. In those cases, you are going to first go through the admission process with the school in order to present the letter of acceptance or the letter of invitation. But that is one option that you can apply for. And of course, adding to that, you are going to have all of the different graduate funding opportunities available from the universities themselves. Like Olivia was saying, you have scholarships. There are also some universities that might offer assistantships, either research assistantships or teaching assistantships. In those cases, it varies from university to university, so it's always very important to check their website. But keep in mind that there's like a wide range of funding options that you can be applying towards.
Absolutely. So taking a look at the next question, is there a photography certificate? Great question. So I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
Of course.
Our website to kind of give you a sense of what navigating a college website looks like. Let me see just a second. Sorry. I'm going to do my full screen here. Okay, so when you go on a university website, they're all going to look a little different, but most of them are going to have a page on a specific major itself. So right here, you can see for SCAD, this is photography. You scroll right here and you see the different degrees that are given out. So at the graduate level, we're looking at MA and we're looking at MFA. So this is going to be a shorter program. So we'll click on MA and that's where you can see. This is where all those classes are listed that I showed you in the PowerPoint, the total number of credit hours, where it's located. And then right here, you can see careers, student work, faculty, student experience. Again, this is going to look different per university, but odds are they're going to have something a little bit similar. So when you're seeing just a list of the programs, actually go into that program and look at that a little bit more in depth. So that was a long way of saying that we do have a photography degree that you can pursue. It's not specifically a certificate, but you can get BFA, BA, MFA, MA. So you have some options there. Now this question here, MA versus MFA. Yes, that's a great question. So as I mentioned in the presentation, that stands for Master of Arts, Master of Fine Arts. Master of Fine Arts is the highest level of education you can achieve in the creative industry. You're not going to pursue a doctorate in animation, in performing arts. You're just not. You're going to get that MFA. So that's going to be slightly more focused on the actual practical arts element. And it's a great way to achieve that full-blown expertise in that area. MA is a great way to obtain graduate level work and still be an expert in that field, shorter amount of time though. So most MAs at SCAD, that's going to take you about a year. Most MFAs are going to take you about 2 years. So that's mainly a big difference, and that kind of makes a lot of times a decision for a student, because I understand a year versus 2 years, it's a really big difference. So that's mainly what they're deciding between. Many opportunities are still offered to both. Having that MFA versus MA is not necessarily going to be a make or break in your career, but know that MFA is the highest level you can achieve.
In relation to this, and also to the question that we got previously, regarding among the many options that you want or that you can consider, I know that many of you, especially if you are interested in this grant that I was referring to before, you're looking for these shorter term options. So along with these type of degrees, the graduate certificates are always also an option that you are going to find in the continuing education colleges or departments of many different universities. If you're interested in those, you can email us so that we can redirect you to the search a little bit. But they're also a good option. They're like highly specialized. You don't end up with a graduate degree per se. That's not the goal of the program, but they do give you a specialized education in that specific field. They're also, and correct me if I'm wrong, Olivia, but they're also very geared towards professionalization in many cases, like
Yes.
applied to the to working specifically in those areas. So that might be another option to consider. Keeping in mind though that sometimes the level, depending on the program, can be a little bit more introductory than what is per se a graduate degree. So I think that's something important to keep in mind as well. Sorry, I just jumped on that.
No, absolutely. Those were great points to make. And absolutely, like you said, the professionalization, that's a huge element of these grad
Mhm.
programs. All right, so a more specific question, design management, if it's useful if I've studied an interior design undergraduate degree. Absolutely. It just depends on what you're looking to do, is what I would say, because that design management is going to shift you a little bit in your ultimate career. If you're wanting to just be an interior designer, then you could still do that, but it maybe would make more sense just to go for an MA or MFA in interior design and really solidify your expertise in interior design. If you're wanting to go just a little bit in a different direction, that design management is extraordinarily innovative. It is going to be producing leaders in the industry, and that can be a really interesting career path. So I would recommend checking it out, checking out that career page, what that actually career would look like in determining if that's a good fit for you. All right, let's see. E-learning means online. You assume correctly. Well done. Has a lower cost than tuition than the face-to-face one. Good question. Okay, so online versus on campus. The tuition is going to be the same. What you are really going to be saving on are those accommodations, meal plans, health insurance, any fees like that. So the online programs, you can take a look at our tuition page and just see what it breaks down to per class. And again, that's going to differ depending upon how many classes. We have students who really are wanting to finish a program quickly, so they take quite a few courses. That price tag is going to be based on those courses versus if you're working at the same time, so you're only taking one class per quarter, again, it's going to differentiate. Now that can be a little different per university. Some universities have more of a set price per semester, and you can take more or less classes. It's going to be that set price. So make sure that you do keep that in mind when you're looking at overall tuition costs. Okay. Do you know which kind of program do we have to apply to get the Fulbright scholarship? Good question. Sandra, do you want to take this one?
Yes, I will jump on this one. So this Ampliación de Estudios Artísticos grant basically covers from the minimum is 6 months up to a year. And you can contemplate different programs, graduate certificate programs. You can also consider 1-year MA programs, of course. But we also have candidates in the past that have gone for a 2-year program. You just need to be aware that the grant covers the first full year and that for a second year, you will need to find additional funding from the university. As Olivia has mentioned, that's a possibility because many universities offer these possibilities of graduate funding. So we do have a lot of students that opt for this track, so to speak, to use the grant to start the program, to do that first year, and then complete in a second year with additional funding from the university. You would maintain your visa sponsorship for that second year as well from the Fulbright program. So you can consider, as I was saying, a vast number of options. You can also consider, and I would like Olivia to maybe talk to us a little bit more about this, the non-degree seeking option. Like how would that work at a practical level, so to speak? Because that's an option that many of our grantees with this specific Fulbright grant opt for.
Absolutely. So it is a good option. It just has a lot of caveats. There's an asterisk near it, and it's important that you understand what that means. So just to kind of go over again, non-degree seeking means that you're coming out of the program without a diploma. So it's a great way to build up your skills. Now, if you're applying to a certain job or whatnot, you can list those classes, but again, it's more skill based. You're showing them that you have skills from that course rather than an official completed degree. As I mentioned, at SCAD, you're not able to qualify for SCAD scholarships, but it can be really nice to only take like 1 or 2 classes to either decide whether you want to commit and go down that path, or just clean up some skills, get to the next level in what you're looking to go after. So it is absolutely a great possibility to pursue. It's just important to understand what that really means. Oh, and one last thing, in terms of applying, sometimes students think as a non-degree student, you don't really need to go through the admission process, and that's just not true. This is still going to be a university class that you're completing, so you do need to be admitted to the university to take that class.
And in the case of this particular grant that I know many of you are interested in, you do have the option or either going for obtaining a degree or combining some classes with a specific research project that you are undertaking at that institution during the period of time of the grant. In this case, you can email us to know more about the specifics, and they are also well explained and on the website. But basically, you are getting not a letter of acceptance, but a letter of invitation to the institution after contacting, well, the professor or the tutor that you would be working on during this process. But basically, you would be carrying out a project, a research project, an artistic project, and maybe combining that with classes. So there's certain flexibility there. But like Olivia said, in those specific cases, it's important to make sure that everything is going to work out and that that project is very solid.
Absolutely. Okay. Question about living on campus. Is it compulsory to live on campus and to also use a meal plan? Good question. This is going to differ a little bit per university. At the graduate level, it's pretty common that it will not be mandatory. At SCAD, it's definitely not, and that's also at the undergraduate level. So you can find your own accommodation. Now, for international students, I will say the majority do choose to live on campus. There's just an easier accessibility there. You have the support of the university, so you don't have to deal with a landlord or anything like that, which can be tricky. But absolutely, you can find your own housing, and that way you're also working with your own meal plan. All of that is going to be up to you to figure out, which can offer more flexibility in terms of finances if you're looking to hopefully save money or whatnot. One last point is with meal plans, there's a wide range, and that's at every university. You can go for a hefty meal plan where you are set to go, and that's all going to be through the university. You can always go to, on-campus dining and get that food. That's great. Or you can go on the other end where you're basically getting, a meal or two and some snacks, and that's fine too. So that meal plan is going to be quite wide ranging.
Okay, the next question, I'm considering to apply for that Fulbright scholarship, but I could just find one program that fits into the certificate category on photography. Do I still have to find other programs and apply as well? In this case, it's a little bit up to you. As I was saying, one of the requirements of the application in this particular case is that you will have to present eventually a letter of acceptance to the program. So I would say that the more applications that you send in advance, the more options that you are going to have. We understand that it might be a little bit tricky to find some of these programs, but we encourage you to do that because there's definitely a wide offer of graduate certificate programs on photography, and like Olivia was saying, even shorter term 1-year programs on photography that could be perfectly valid for this scholarship. So I would encourage you to keep going at it a little bit more, like widen a little bit that search so that you can maybe submit a few more applications, and that way, so basically so that you are not counting just on one option, I would say.
Great points. So next question, coming from outside the world of art and design. I would like to know about interdisciplinary programs that could allow me to enter the design world. Okay, that's a great question. In your case, it looks like culinary experiences. That's very cool. So I think it just depends on what you would like to do, which I know is quite broad. But the reason why I'm saying that is because truly many of the graduate level courses don't require an official undergraduate experience in that field. As I mentioned in the presentation, the most important element is the portfolio. So just taking a quick glance at what that actually looks like. Again, if you go on SCAD's website, and I'm sure it will be very similar at other web universities, right here, graduate portfolios. Take a look at what these portfolios would be. You know, if you're wanting to go into, design management and somehow connect that into your culinary expertise, that could be really cool. But you need to take a look at this and see, well, what are those requirements? And it also gives you a little bit of insight into what the program actually looks like, because these are the expectations of going into the program. So that's going to help you understand the program just a little bit more on itself. Now, as I said, really for us, architecture is going to be the one where you need to have that experience. Otherwise, all of these are open to you. So just because you had that culinary experience is not going to be a gatekeeper in terms of the getting into the creative industry. It just depends on what you want to do. Again, photography might not be related at all to the culinary industry, but it could be if you wanted to. I think what could be cool for you is take a look at these programs. If one speaks to you, reach out and see if you can speak to a faculty member, because they're going to have the greatest amount of insight into, yeah, I worked with a student who had these two interests. They combined it really well. This is what it looked like. Okay, and then COVID. Is it more likely that non-e-learning classes will shift online as well? Okay, so good question. As of right now, we are hoping to be 100% on ground for the fall. That is the plan. We will absolutely change that if it is not safe. What has been amazing this past year has been we've always had e-learning, which is an award-winning online program. What we added, though, was more of a synchronous element, which we call SCAD Now. So e-learning is studying completely at your own pace. You log in when you want. SCAD Now Virtual, it's an actual, you log in at the class time. Now we're going to continue having those options and just having a more virtual opportunities overall available to students. So that's kind of something that's pretty cool to keep in mind. So there is some flexibility. So maybe if we're having on ground, but you still need to wait in your own country, okay, well, maybe start online for a quarter and then come to campus in January. There is a level of flexibility, but on our end, we're hoping to be operating fully on ground starting in the fall.
And I think we have one final question. This will be the last question, and then we'll finalize the session since it was scheduled to finish at 6. But after this, please feel free to contact any of us with any questions you may have.
Okay, so this question is specific to this student. They sent in documentation, they were accepted into SCAD, but they couldn't study with us. Would they have to start over again? That's a good question, and that happens for various reasons. What I would say firstly is that just kind of this is a general FYI to students. You can a lot of times roll your admission. So talk to the university. Sometimes they will allow you to defer for an entire year. At SCAD, you can defer for a couple quarters, and that just keeps the process super simple. In this case, you will have to reapply, but we're going to have many of those materials on hand. So just talk to us and mainly let us know what you would like to now incorporate, because many times students will actually have more materials that strengthens their application, which yes, I know you were already accepted, but that may help in terms of your scholarship. So if you have material that's going to help your application, do send it to us, and we'll help go through that process. It will be a little bit quicker because we have that material on hand, but you do need to reapply.
Okay, so I think that was the last question. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to our speaker, Olivia. Thank you so much for all of the wonderful information and for answering all of our questions. Please feel free to email us, all of you, with any questions that you may have, specific to a SCAD for Olivia, or more in general regarding search of programs, the Fulbright grant, other funding opportunities. You can send it to us in Education USA Spain. You have a contact form on the website of the Fulbright Commission. So feel free to do that. And thank you again. We hope that the session was useful for all of you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you. Oh, and remember that you will have access to the session at the end of this week on YouTube in case you want to revisit it. I just forgot, almost forgot. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.